So it's always fun to come to Texas and talk to people. What Alice asked me to do is to first go through some of the data issues that are swarming out there, and then the other thing, she asked me to sort of step back and give more of a big picture of what's going on here and who's doing this and why are they doing it. And so I pondered that for a while and put together a new PowerPoint to raise some things that you might want to, things that I have, it took me a while to realize some of these things that are going on, but I think I'm at least starting to go down the road. This thing is so big and has so many layers to it and so many pieces, and it's hard to really grasp it. But I hope that maybe we can make a little bit of progress on that. Data mining is one of the big aspects of Common Core, because Common Core is not just standards. It is standards and assessments and the data. For states that got Race to the Top money, they had to agree to do three things. They had to adopt the Common Core standards, they had to adopt the assessments, and they had to continue to build out their huge state student databases. That's what's going on. Those of you who have been in the education battles for a long time may know the name Mark Tucker, the National Center for Education and the Economy. And he wrote a famous or infamous, as the case may be, letter to Hillary Clinton back when her husband was first elected president, saying, this is great, we can do all these wonderful things now that you're going to be in office, and this is what he wanted to do. The federal government should remold the entire American system for human resource development. A seamless system. They want to take kids from when they first are born and follow them into the workforce. They want to know everything there is to know. To do what Arnie Duncan said he wants to do, we have to know everything Johnny does. We have to know what courses he took. Did he graduate on time? Did he go to college? If so, which college? Which courses did he take there? What grades did he make? Did he drop out? Did he keep going? Did he go to graduate school? Did he join the military? Did he get in trouble with the law? What jobs did he have? What did he make on those jobs? Did he switch jobs? Did he move to a different state? We have to know all of that, because if you're going to run the economy and run society, you have to have data. You have to have the information. You can't do it without that. Okay. The whole data collection thing and building state, they're called SLDS, statewide longitudinal data systems. That all goes back way before the Obama administration. But for our purposes, because we can't go into all that, let's look at the most recent history of it, which is the stimulus bill. Y'all remember that from 2009? Okay, there was something in the stimulus bill that was the state fiscal stabilization fund. Any state that wanted to get money from the state fiscal stabilization fund had to agree to build out its student data system according to very specific guidelines. And so that was one thing. Then Race to the Top came along, and if you were going to apply for Race to the Top, which most states did, you had to agree, again, to work on your data system and to build it out according to federal guidelines. And this results in a massive student database. Now, why are they getting the states to build these databases? Why didn't the federal government do it? Well, this is why. There's a statute out there, and statutes used to mean something. They don't too much anymore, but this one says that it is illegal to have a federal student database. So the solution to that problem is get the states to build databases and make all those databases identical. And if they're identical, then the data can be shared. How much did Texas get? $18.2 million from the Fiscal Stabilization Fund. And this is what they're doing with it. This is according to Texas's application. To integrate key data into the P20 data warehouse, P meaning preschool, 20 meaning into the workforce. P12 would be preschool through high school, P16 through college, P20 into the workforce. P20 data warehouse to better understand students' preparedness to contribute to the 21st century workforce. Anytime you hear people talking about the 21st century skills, 21st century global economy, 21st century whatever, guard the silver, because they are up to no good. And there's tracking of students going on in Texas. You see the Texas Tribune use data from these commissions to document the educational outcomes of every student who started 8th grade in a Texas public school. During these particular academic years, each student was anonymously tracked over 11 years to determine the percentage of Texas 8th graders who achieved a post-secondary certificate or degree. Anonymously, we'll get back to that in a minute. Don't relax when you see that word. Now, there is federal privacy law. There's a privacy law called FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. FERPA has been around since 1974. And the people across the street, Mr. Duncan will tell us that we don't have anything to worry about because FERPA protects your student data. Well, it used to. And to some extent, it doesn't anymore. As of January of 2012, the Obama administration gutted FERPA. They did it not through revising the statute, amending the statute, because that would have required going through Congress, so they did it through regulation. And now the FERPA allows essentially unlimited sharing of student data, both by the U.S. Department of Education and by state departments of education and by schools. They can literally give personally identifiable student data to anyone in the world as long as they use the right language. They just have to say that this is for an audit or evaluation of an education program, and I can make anything sound like an audit or evaluation of an education program. Use the right language. The parents will not be able to object to this sharing, this disclosure of data, because generally they will not even know that it has happened. So that's how much protection you get from FERPA. So we see all of these state legislatures are trying to do their state data protection statutes, and they will say that we will comply with FERPA, and we say, big deal. FERPA is nothing anymore. All right, so a specific, just to tell you, even though Texas is not in these tests, let me tell you, the Common Core Testing Consortia, there are two. One is called PARC, one is called Smarter Balance. They're both horrible. Each of those consortia, and they are both being funded illegally by the federal government, they have agreements with the U.S. Department of Education that any data that the consortia get from the student testing, the Common Core testing, will be made available to the U.S. Department of Education on an ongoing basis for research and tracking. Is running a bunch of initiatives to that deal with student data, and all of them, every single one of them, is designed to increase the amount of data that is collected on students and to increase the accessibility of that, to make sure that it could be shared across state lines with all the various stakeholders in education. These are just a few of them. Workforce Data Quality Initiative, which, and Texas is doing this. This is where your state education, your Texas Education Agency would be sharing data with your state labor department and that sort of thing. Because remember, this is a workforce development model. So you have to be able to share the data. Common education data standards are to make sure that all the states are using the same data terminology so that it can be more easily shareable. Digital Pass, I won't get into all these things, but these are just a few of the initiatives that the federal government is funding and actively pursuing so that they can make sure that the data is collected and data is shared. All right, what kinds of data are we talking about? The National Education Data Model, which is connected with the Department of Education, has a list of over 400 data points on each child, and this is what they recommend be collected. This is not mandated yet, but the states are being encouraged very much to go down that road of collecting all of these things, and just some of them, some of them are obvious. It would be test scores and things like that, but of course healthcare history. And you've got kids who have IEPs, kids who, psychological reports, all of that stuff is in there. Information on the family, the income levels, that sort of thing, voting status. Disciplinary history. If your kid had a rough 8th grade year and got suspended once, that's going to be there forever. And this is a workforce development model, and some of the stakeholders in education are employers. So who's going to see this down the road? The federal government is also doing something called the My Data Initiative. If you look at go on the U.S. Department of Education website and Google that, and they want to be able to sort of to enable children to kind of carry their dossier around with them, to download your own data, everything that is there. And what is to prohibit employers down the road from saying, could I take a look at that? Let's see if this child had anger management issues when he was in the 6th grade. Let's see if he got suspended. But, of course, they say anonymization is what's going to save us from this, because they will not put the names or social security numbers with this data, so, of course, nobody will know who they're talking about. Well, there are whole books written about this, about how you cannot anonymize data, not in the current world in which we live. If the data is going to be useful, it cannot be anonymized to certainty. This was a law review article by a man named Paul and he said, utility and privacy compete with each other. If the data are useful, they will not be anonymized. You can't do it. There are too many data points for data matching, and there are many, many examples. There was one with Netflix that was a famous one from some years ago, where they were able to data match and figure out who had submitted all of these movie reviews, and it's happened in education. In Kentucky, there was a case where they were able to match so-called anonymous data with other data and figure out with 100% accuracy who everybody was, which every student was. So when they say that it's all anonymized, every time I speak, and if there's an IT person in the room, they always laugh when I say the government says, oh, this will be anonymous, so you don't have to worry about it, because it can't be done. All right, so where are we going with this? Well, one good way to figure this out is to look at what the U.S. Department of Education is actually doing. What are they talking about? What are they advocating? What kind of reports are they writing with our tax money? And one of these reports that they wrote and put out about, well, a draft, you can see it still says draft. They haven't put it out finally yet and probably never will now that people are upset about it, is called Promoting Grit, Tenacity, and Perseverance. Critical factors for success. There's that 21st century again. Y'all realize that the 21st century is just completely different in human history from every other century we've ever had. And everything now has to be completely different, and things that worked in the past will never work again, so we have to have the 21st century skills, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is their report. That now you can't just focus on academic knowledge. You have to focus on all of these non-cognitive factors, these things, grit, tenacity, and perseverance. And of course, if you're going to worry about those things, and by the way, it's they say that Common Core is connected to this because Common Core requires, in the math standards, it requires students to wrestle with problems and to persevere in solving them, and which. It seems to me that if you actually taught the child how to do the math, he wouldn't have to persevere and he would just learn to do it. But that's not the way they do it now. So if it's in Common Core and this is an important part of 21st century education, then you have to measure it somehow, right? Okay, well, how do you do that? According to the report, some of the most promising new directions are educational data mining and effective computing. What's an effective computing, I wonder? It's where you measure physiological reactions to stimuli. Discrete emotions, particularly relevant to reactions to challenge, such as interest, frustration, anxiety, and boredom, may be measured through analysis of facial expressions, EEG brainwave patterns, skin conductance, heart rate variability, posture, and eye tracking. You can tell how students are reacting to a lesson by measuring all of these things. And helpfully, on page 44 of the report, they give pictures of the devices that they would use to do this. A facial expression camera, posture analysis seat, pressure mouse, wireless skin conductance sensor. The Gates Foundation, by the way, is financing research, this skin conductance thing, which I'm ashamed to say at my alma mater, Clemson University. They gave $500,000 to Clemson to come up with wireless skin conductance sensors that students could wear. And originally it was advertised as a way to evaluate teachers. I'm very serious, that the teachers' evaluations could be based, at least in some part, on the physiological reactions of the students in the class. Then there was an uproar about that, so they went back and they rewrote the grant application so that they eliminated the teacher evaluation. They said, oh, no, we're just looking at what's effective. We're not looking at that. Am I saying that when the Common Core tests come out, or when whatever test you're using in Texas get into the next 21st century edition, that kids are going to be hooked up to these things? No, not really. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if you want to know the mindset of the people behind this, you look at these reports that they're doing, because this tells you what they think is important and what they think should be done. And if you read that report, it's 120-something pages. I think there was one paragraph in it that talked about how this could be a problem with privacy. This could raise privacy concerns. Mostly what they said was that the problem with all of this measuring people's physiological reactions, The problem is that it's not practical for the classroom yet, board says. Okay, so there was another report that came out about the same time from the U.S. Department of Education. This one doesn't even make any sense. I always have a hard time remembering this title because it doesn't make sense, and I think they maybe left out a colon or something. Maybe there was supposed to be a colon after evidence, expanding evidence, approaches to learning. I don't know, but anyway, it doesn't make any sense, but this is it. And this report focuses on digital learning, which is all the rage. If you look at anything online for Education Week, all these things, everything, every seminar, every webinar, everything is all about digital learning, and it's going to be transformative and blah, blah, blah. Digital learning, you need to understand this. This is not an alternative way of accessing text. It's not like taking your Kindle and reading a book on Kindle rather than reading it on a page. The digital learning that they're talking about are the interactive computer platforms where students are sitting in front of their iPad or their computer and they're given a prompt and then they respond to the prompt. And then that leads to another prompt and then they respond to that prompt, and think Pavlov. That's what they're talking about when they're talking about digital learning, and that's what this report talks about, and this is worth reading too. Some of these digital learning resources are sophisticated systems capable of collecting large amounts of fine-grained data. Fine-grained is what they refer to this as users interact. Learners will generate vast quantities of data. We'll talk about that in a second. These deeper learning objectives align with the Common Core standards and the next generation science standards, which emphasize deeper learning objectives. And we'll talk about that as well. So what are they talking about? How does somebody giving off this fine-grained data? You can measure non-cognitive, remember that's the important thing in 21st century education, such as collaboration, persistence, leadership, by capturing micro-level data. You watch what the student, the computer records how the student is interacting with the platform. You can measure the problem-solving sequences, knowledge, strategy use, including each student's selections or inputs, the number of attempts a student makes, the number of hints and feedback given, and the time allocated across each part of the process. Everything, every keystroke tells them something about the student, not so much about what he knows, but how his mind is working. And you can track data about students as they transition among educational settings. And they also, the report is very big on disclosing data, interagency data sharing. And so you can give it to the Department of Education, Department of Social Services, Department of Health and Human Services, whatever, to better understand relationships between students' conditions outside school. Because you have to have what I know in Tennessee they call it the 360-degree view of the student. You have to know everything that's going on in the student's life in order to, for his own good, of course, to educate him in the 21st century. I personally don't want the government knowing everything there is to know about my child, but that's just me. All right, again from the report. A team at the University of Massachusetts is combining data from sensors that detect learners' facial expressions and physical activity with data from the intelligent tutoring system weighing Outpost to identify in real time whether a learner is feeling excited, confident, frustrated, or bored. By the way, I was giving a presentation in Georgia, and a young guy stood up, and because I was talking about, this stuff could happen in the classroom, and he said, "Excuse me, it already is. I know because I work for the company. I work for a company that does these." And he said, so many of the devices, touchscreen devices, he said, we can record so much data on a student every time he touches a screen. We get a fingerprint, we get body temperature, we get all kinds of things. And he said, it's essentially a question of flipping a switch, and then you can do this. And I said, do teachers know that this is what these capabilities are? And he said, generally not. Teachers would usually not know. He said, the administrators probably know, maybe not. He said, the people who created it certainly know. So it's already there. Does anybody here have, well, I won't even ask, but the thing that came out last Christmas, it was the Xbox One, I think, which I told my kids you are absolutely not getting because it watches you as you play it. It can watch up to 6 players and record their reactions to things, and it's all for the marketing purposes. But it can tell what each player is doing and how he's doing it and all that. And this guy who worked in IT told me, He said, it's the same thing that the educational technology can do the same thing. They can do it. He said, you could have 300. The Xbox One watches 6 people just because they think that you're not going to have more than 6 people at one time. But in a class that had 300 students, he said you could do it for 300. It's all there. This is my absolute favorite. This is when you're trying to modify children's behaviors. Behaviors are very important. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is from the report, something called Class Doho, a real-time behavior management tool, and you got to love this. Students receive feedback on their positive and negative behaviors in real time. A positive behavior is acknowledged with a chime and a green badge that appears on the student's avatar, and a negative behavior is marked by a buzzer and a red badge. About a year and a half ago, there was a conference at the U.S. Department of Education. It was called Datapalooza. You can't make this stuff up. They invited all of these people in from technology, educational tech companies to come in and talk about their great transformational things they were doing. One of them was a guy named Sean Bay from eScholar. And do y'all use eScholar here? Because there are a lot of schools I know in Georgia that use eScholar. But anyway, and he said, we collect billions of records of data. We're pulling it from everywhere, tens of thousands of places. And Common Core is the glue that ties it all together. Why is that? Because Common Core, as you learned yesterday, is not about academic knowledge. It is about 21st century skills, behaviors, attitudes, mindsets. It's the way this comes into the classroom. The standards require it, therefore we will measure it this way.